Hi, my name is Marcus and I'm here on behalf of Fracture Sounds to show you the latest instrument from their Blueprint series, Textural Violin. Blueprint is a series of free sample instruments compatible with the Kontakt 7 player that are curated from Fracture Sounds' experiments and their passion projects. And in this instance, Textural Violin was the blueprint for what would later become Trails, the new library released in collaboration with composer and violinist Alexander Parsons, the walkthrough for which can also be found on this channel. So today I'm going to be showing you through this blueprint instrument, and then I'm going to show you a piece of music that I've written, which, I'm quite proud of this, has been written entirely with Textural Violin. So let's get into it. So right off the bat, stunning interface in my favourite colour, not that that's particularly important. First of all, of course, is the controls. We have dynamics, which is fairly self-explanatory and controlled by CC1 or your mod wheel. Scatter pans each sample randomly, which is definitely more noticeable when using the Col-Legno articulation. Sticking with Col-Legno for now, the delay control, which if I click on these cogwheels has all of the same features as the Trails library, including the ability to switch this ping pong bat on and off, which pans the delay left and right to give you even more of a stereo spread. So if I turn the delay all the way up and then the ping pong bat off, this is how that sounds. And then with the ping pong bat. Next we have our reverb, which also features a set of controls to fine-tune it to your liking. And then last but not least, our Fracture Sounds atmosphere, which can be soloed with this button here and sounds rather nice. I'm going to switch back to free tremolo just so you can hear it. So now let's have a look at the articulations. I'm going to bring the delay back down for this. Our first one is free tremolo. We have Col-Legno, spikes, which is very kind of lively, you can kind of hear at the end there a sort of resemblance to the reflections articulation in Trails. Lastly, my personal favourite, bends. Yeah, I love that one. It's got a real midsummer vibe to it. And a feature that has carried over from the Trails library, these cogwheels down on the bottom left of each articulation will open up these parameters for you to adjust, and each one is independent. So for instance, say I want to put my Col-Legnos well over on the right, I can do that, and this is adjusted independently of the other articulations. So playing tremolo, switching to Col-Legno, there it is. I'm just going to quickly look at the settings page, which has two controls, the first of which is tightness, which cuts into the sample for ease of playing. And dynamic range increases or decreases the audible volume of loud and soft samples. So at full, it sounds like this. And then all the way down sounds like this. Last thing to mention is if I hold down Shift, I can select multiple articulations. Here's how they sound together. Cool, so that was the instrument, and now I'm going to show you the piece of music that I've written for it, which I'm actually quite proud of, because this one, with the exception of Logic's inbuilt orchestral bass drum and Fracture Sounds' Blueprint electric keys, all of these tracks up here are Textural Violin. Here's how they sound. So going through each track, starting with the main violin, and I say it's the main one just because it's the most original sounding one, I think. We've got all of the controls here set pretty much standard, using the modulation to bring the dynamics up, and then the key switcher to switch from the free tremolo articulation to the bends. Got so much tension, I absolutely love it. Moving on to the second track, which is spikes. This just adds a little bit of extra texture, especially towards the end. So you can see that I've turned the scatter up and the delay, which is set to half time. But if I go into the reverb settings, Fracture Sounds have introduced a couple of new types. So I've chosen shimmer here and turned the size up a little bit. And to compensate for this, I turned the atmosphere down so it's not getting too mushy, basically. So going into one of two Col Legno tracks, this one's used more like percussion to give the rhythm of the piece. You can hear the delay doing its work there. What I actually did was I right-clicked on it and I learnt MIDI CC automation, which allowed me to control the delay using what I usually use for vibrato control. So this meant that at the beginning of the piece I could have the delay turned off, and then about here it turns on, which is really helpful for the end of the piece because it just really builds and builds on top of itself. Reverb is the shimmer again. I think I set the reverb on the first instrument and then duplicated that track, so I had the same reverb in each instance of this instrument. Our next Col Legno track is a cello, which is this tuned down by 15 semitones. Now, why such an odd number of semitones? Well, I wanted this to sound as realistic as I possibly could, and this piece is in B major, which means the lowest chord played in the piece is an E. It's sort of like E, F sharp, and then goes back up to B. It doesn't go down to B. Now, the lowest note on the violin is obviously a G, but this isn't an octave above E, it's actually 15 semitones above an E. So knowing that E major would be the lowest chord I'd be playing in this cello, I played it in as if I was playing G major standard pitch. Does this make sense? If it doesn't, I'm terrible at explaining. But yeah, essentially playing in D major so I can utilize the lowest note of the violin, the lowest sample, then pitch shifting that down 15 semitones. That takes us down to B major plus an octave. I think I got there eventually. That took like 15 minutes for me to explain. I've hopefully edited it down to a bit less than that. Atmos layer, pretty self-explanatory this one, nice and easy. But the track that I am most proud of in this piece is this one that I've titled Crunch, which again has the same pitch shift down as the Col Legno cello, but in this instance is using the free tremolo, scatter turned up, and then what I've done is I've automated the delay using CC21, which is what I usually use for vibrato. And this has the interesting effect, as it turns up, it starts to distort inbuilt amplifier, or it's something to do with the way Fracture Sounds have programmed it, but it overdrives, and it makes this really, really good sound. And at the end there, that was me turning down the delay, which stops that overdrive from happening, and then turning the atmosphere onto solo, so that basically all of the cello sound just disappears in an instant and we're just left with a kind of reverb tail. Now, say what you like about any other feature in this library, I personally think it's worth downloading for that alone. But looking a little bit more in depth at what I did here, the first port of call was to use the loudest original sample, so turn the modulation up to full, so the dynamics are at full, and then just to be extra safe, I've cranked the velocity of each note up to 127, just to make sure it's as loud as possible. And I've automated Kontakt's volume a little bit, just to sculpt the sound a little bit more to my liking. And then this here is a CC which is controlling the solo button, Wrapping up quickly, I've got my signature Blueprint electric bass, the electric keys pitch shifted down 36 semitones. And in the settings, just to make this a bit more playable, I've turned the sample start up, which is the same as the tightness control in Textural Violin, cuts into the sample, which, when you've pitch shifted a sample down 36 semitones, you're playing that sample a lot slower, so any tiny delay that might be at the start of the original is going to be multiplied quite a lot when you've pitch shifted it down so far. So we definitely want the tightness turned up, as little latency as possible. So that's the only thing really to mention in that instance. And then finally, Logic Pro's bass drum from the orchestral kit. There we go. In conclusion, I love this library. I think this might be my favourite Blueprint to date, in fact, because I think we all have a tendency to assume, myself included, that if a library is free, it must somehow, like so many things in life, it must somehow be inferior or a lesser version of the full library that you pay for. And I really don't think that's the case. The Blueprint series brings a lot to the table that isn't necessarily found in the full versions of these libraries, such that even if you've already bought Trails, this is well worth downloading as well, especially given that all you have to do to get it is sign up to the Fracture Sounds newsletter. So on that note, thank you very much for watching me through to the end. Please consider subscribing so that you don't miss any more fantastic free sample instruments in the future, and I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.